Welcome everybody to New Heart, New World. I'm Rasika Manjari and I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about adjusting our expectations. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about what I mean by that in a moment. Now you may have noticed that wherever we look in our world today, there's turmoil, upheaval and disharmony. Our systems are in distress. Ultimately, planet Earth is in distress, and of course we, as a result, are in distress. And the most difficult thing, I think, for us collectively is that there's no definitive endpoint to when all of this will end. The current crisis that humanity finds itself in, there's no end in sight, and it's just difficult to plan and to actually thrive in any way, shape or form in this kind of uncertainty. So while all this is going on, our freedoms are being restricted, our activities are being restricted and our choices are being restricted, and we're all feeling it. So no one's exempt. We all, despite, it doesn't matter where we are on this planet, at some level our environments are being affected, and thus we as individuals are all being influenced by the goings-on of the broader global community. Now, if we think about it, what's going on at the moment in the form of, the virus and the various earthly disruptions like earthquakes, floods, fires, volcanoes, so many different things that are suddenly all culminating in some way on this planet at the moment. If we think about it, what's happening is really nothing new in terms of what's been already happening on our planet for millions of years. I mean, this kind of thing is typical of planet Earth, and being part of the human race is full of difficult transitions, chaos and even disaster of various proportions. So it's not like we don't know about it or we're not used to it. However, at the moment things have definitely reached some kind of culmination point, and we're actually being forced in a way to look at things a little bit differently if we're wise, and to question, why is this going on at this particular point in time? Now, we wonder, why suddenly now are our structures collapsing, our earth is shaking and our systems are imploding? And this is really, in the Bhakti Yoga worldview, we have an explanation which really puts things in perspective and is worthwhile considering, because the Bhakti Yoga worldview states that the planet Earth goes through cyclically a period of 4 different ages. Now, each of these ages lasts for millennia and is continuously cycling through them over time. And the ages are as follows: the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. Now, no prizes for guessing. We're in the Iron Age at the moment. And this Iron Age is an age of degeneration, degradation, quarrel, and hypocrisy. So the goings-on at the moment, and which have been over time already, as this Kali Yuga is already relatively progressed in its time frame. So these goings-on are actually expected as part of the Bhakti Yoga worldview at this point in time on planet Earth. So that may or may not give comfort to the hearer of this information. However, it's according to the Bhakti Yoga worldview, this is true in that, in a sense, we're expecting difficulties and challenges more so than at any other time in the cycles of the ages. Now, the reason we as individuals are here at this point in time is another conversation altogether, and I will go into that a little bit more in future videos. However, basically it involves a complex system of karma and reincarnation, also important aspects of the Bhakti Yoga philosophy and worldview. So just very briefly, reincarnation is a process where we migrate from body to body, lifetime after lifetime, in a cycle of life which is designed ultimately to bring us to spiritual freedom. And the way we embrace the opportunities given to us for spiritual growth along the way as we're moving from life to life is how, of course, we'll progress as we move on our spiritual journeys. And karma is again another complex system of the results of our activities and choices that we make as we progress from life to life. So with that in mind, we have to understand that there are various laws on this planet, and there are laws of physics and so many laws that we abide by because we actually have no other alternative. They're just the laws of nature. And nature, with its laws, actually is not very compromising in a sense. And when the laws are transgressed, then nature reciprocates accordingly. So Mother Nature, as she's so affectionately termed by many of us on this planet, actually reciprocates in kind as she has been treated. And we may have realized at some level, many of us, that we actually live in a culture of exploitation and desiring to enjoy the spoils of Mother Nature without much regard for the consequences. And awareness of this has been heightened over recent years, and we have come to a greater understanding as a whole that we may need to change some of our lifestyle choices and wide-reaching decisions that we've made over time in order to preserve our lives on this planet and to protect the further degradation of Mother Earth. So this is something that is not new to many of you, and it's actually a very well understood phenomena as we try and battle things such as global warming and the degradation of our environment. But here we are in Kali Yuga, as the Iron Age is termed in the Bhakti Yoga philosophy. And the reason we're here, of course, part of our karmic results and the reincarnation that I mentioned before, but the true reason is that it's a result of actually not knowing what is good for us, not knowing how to go about our daily lives in a way that's not going to harm anyone, and least of all ourselves. And not only that, but actually allow us to progress in our lives, both materially and spiritually. So we don't have the basics. Somehow that knowledge was lost along the way. And that knowledge, which is akin to a kind of darkness, so we're not able to see because of that darkness. And this is where Bhakti Yoga comes in. Bhakti Yoga comes in to shed that light, to give us that illumination so that we can see our way out of the quagmire and to really understand the truth of who we truly are as spiritual beings. Because ultimately that is the essence of our identities, is that we are spiritual in nature and we are actually parts and parcels of the supreme divine soul who actually is waiting for us to re-establish our connection with him in loving relationship, which is ultimately the purpose of spiritual advancement and development. Now, this supreme soul and personality is called Krishna in the Bhakti Yoga texts, but he's also commonly known as God. So once we understand who we are as unique individual spiritual souls, then we can start to, in our new understanding and in that enlightened state of being, we can start to take steps to re-establish our relationship with the Supreme Divine Krishna. Because when we understand this, we realize that planet Earth as we know it, in her incredible suffering and difficulty at the moment is not actually where we originate from, nor is planet Earth our ultimate destination. No, we are destined for far greater things. We are destined, in fact, to live eternally in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, in the spiritual world. Now, that is quite a lofty understanding. However, it's an achievable one. It's an achievable concept to grasp, and it's also an achievable thing to realize in our actual reality. So, because of this darkness that we have found ourselves in collectively as humanity as a whole, this idea that we are spiritual souls, unique and independent in our own way, that because of that darkness, we just forgot this fact. And so with that forgetfulness comes this mentality of separateness or separation from the rest of humanity and Mother Nature herself. So when we feel so disconnected, and this is reflected in so many ways in our society, I mean, there's so much suffering and despair and misery at so many levels, and of course this is reflected in the burden that the World Health Organization mentions of mental illness on our society at the moment. And this is part of a symptom of that disconnection we have even from ourselves, let alone our fellow human beings and the planet as a whole. But ultimately, we have to understand that we actually are unified in one very important way. Even though we are each individual and sovereign in ourselves, we are actually also unified by the fact that we are all spirit souls as parts and parcels of the Supreme Spirit Soul, Krishna. And this forgetfulness, it's a bit like if you think about an elephant, and just imagine a he or she elephant thinking itself an ant. Now, that's severely undercutting the elephant's strength, prowess, power and stateliness. So this elephant who thinks he's an ant or she's an ant is strutting around thinking actually they're the king of the ants, and basically fighting and competing for a grain of sugar in order to bring them happiness. Now, we're much like that elephant thinking it's an ant, but what the ant doesn't realize is that truly it's an elephant, and that it's entitled to fields of sugarcane, not just one little grain of sugar here and there. So in this way, we have to realize that we are actually godly in a sense that when our true spiritual nature is revealed and uncovered to us through the practice and teachings of Bhakti Yoga, then we understand that yes, we have those qualities that make us actually godly. However, we're not God. We're not the king of the ants as we may think. We actually are parts and parcels of that supreme God, Krishna. And by virtue of that, by virtue of being connected with him, then we are in ourselves godly. Now, that may then beg the question as, okay, well, if we're so godly, then why do we suffer so much? And why is life such a struggle for so many? And the answer to that is that ultimately, as a collective, we're starving. Our souls are starving because of that darkness, because of that lack of knowledge, because of ultimately ignorance in many ways. We don't know what to feed it. We don't know what to feed our souls because actually we don't even realize that we are a soul most of the time. So when we don't even know we are a soul, then of course we're not expected to know what to feed it or how to feed it, and in what quantity and when. And so of course we need information for that. We need knowledge, and this is where Bhakti Yoga comes into the rescue. Bhakti Yoga comes in with an illuminated set of instructions and clarity and guidance, which are brought down from enlightened souls of old, who bring their understanding of humanity and its potential, and also that humanity in its essence is spiritual in nature. So when we can start to understand these fundamental truths, then of course we can start to feed our souls. And that starvation, that soul starvation, which we can see manifest symptomatically in so many different ways, and it's really, when we just look outside of ourselves towards what's going on in the world, we can see that we are seeking happiness in so many ways, and often it's a very very destructive ways in many expressions of this search for happiness. And where we think we'll find happiness, it's not necessarily where we actually find happiness. And if we do find a little happiness or pleasure, it's rarely long lasting or never long lasting, and we can also say for sure that it's never eternal. So because our origins are not on this planet Earth, and ultimately our destination is not here, ultimately we belong in the spiritual sky in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we need to come to that understanding at some point on a process of evolution, reincarnating from body to body, because once we understand that, then we can take steps towards reaching the true destination and the true happiness that is really ours by birthright. So when we can feed, now you might be questioning, well, okay, so how do I feed my soul when I'm understanding finally that I actually am a spirit soul? And this comes down to really the simple activities of becoming familiar with the philosophy of Bhakti Yoga, and also beginning a practice of Bhakti Yoga and incorporating the concepts of the culture and practice into your life on a day-to-day basis. And this forms soul food and is actually the recipe for eternal eternal happiness that never fades or disappears or is disappointing. It is actually the ultimate fulfillment of the soul. And when we can realize this and give our souls what it needs, our souls are eternally thankful, because our souls are eternal, and that's nothing else will cut it for our souls. It needs eternal happiness and the kind of lifestyle and consciousness that is not going to be so easily influenced by the external disturbances of the material world that we find ourselves in. And when we find ourselves anchored in our spiritual practice, then despite what goes on around us, despite the many inevitable challenges we will always face while we live on this planet, then we are not disturbed in the way that we may have been otherwise without this understanding and practice in our lives. And the more we practice Bhakti Yoga, the more entrenched it becomes into who we are. And of course, our consciousness changes. We are transformed. And the true spiritual essence of who we really are is revealed to a greater and greater degree. And this is what we can look forward to when we adopt the practices of Bhakti Yoga into our lives and start to understand the Bhakti Yoga philosophy and worldview, which is absolutely all-encompassing and all-inclusive. It doesn't exclude anyone. Everyone can benefit from Bhakti Yoga, and there are no qualifications required. You don't have to be rich, beautiful, smart, wise. You don't have to be any of those things. You just need to be open. You just need to come with an open mind and heart and be ready to embrace something that is just going to ultimately bring you eternal happiness. So we are much more than we think. We don't really recognize ourselves for who we truly are, because when we look in the mirror, usually that's who we think we are. And usually that's where it stops. And I mean, how disappointing is that? Especially when, we're having a bad hair day or something. I mean, of course, that's not who we truly are. I mean, if we were just this body, then no wonder we'd be feeling miserable and disappointed about ourselves all the time. And of course, unfortunately, this is the condition of many of us on planet Earth at this point in time as part of humanity that inhabits it. So it pays to reconsider our place in the world and reconsider it in the sense of readjusting our expectations, which is what I was alluding to at the beginning of the talk, that these expectations we have of achieving ultimate happiness through our endeavors, through our material endeavors on a day-to-day basis as we live our daily lives, even if we feel that we might gain ultimate happiness by that new job or that new relationship or that new house or changing our situation or living somewhere else. I mean, look, it may benefit us at some level in some way. However, it's not the solution to the eternal experience that we're seeking. And we have to remember that what we seek is seeking us. And Bhakti Yoga seeks you because you are seeking happiness. And Bhakti Yoga is the answer to that. And so these are expectations of expecting happiness, when we adjust them to realize that, okay, while we're on this planet, there'll always be something that will thwart my plans or make me reconsider what I'm doing or even break my heart or disappoint me. There will always be something around the corner. However, when we're absolutely established in our spiritual identities, then nothing can shake us. No superficial current can affect the deep, profound waters deep within us. And the way this manifests is, I guess, another analogy that is actually outlined in the Bhakti Yoga philosophy is that when we water the root of a tree, then naturally the fruits and the flowers and the leaves flourish and thrive and come to full expression of their potentials. However, when we try to water the fruit and the flowers and the leaves by themselves, then the tree doesn't benefit. No one benefits, and ultimately the tree will wither and die because the roots aren't getting the water it needs. And very similarly, we find ourselves in that position. So the watering of the fruit and the flowers and the leaves is akin to trying to find happiness in places where happiness just does not exist in an eternal form anyway. And, so many people, in the absence of finding happiness in their day-to-day lives, seek it in extreme forms, like, for example, illicit drugs or alcohol or so many different extreme sports or so many different things that really are ultimately life-threatening and can potentially be destructive. I mean, no offense against extreme sports, but to be honest with you, they're not where it's at. And that's what watering the fruits and the flowers and the trees, the leaves of the tree is like. However, when we water the root, when we feed our soul with the practice and philosophy and culture of Bhakti Yoga, then that's when we start to really thrive. And naturally, the happiness that comes from that is an expression of the fulfillment of who we truly are as spiritual beings. And the happiness that comes from that, which is the natural fruits and flowers and leaves that come from watering the root of the tree, is no less than eternal bliss and ecstasy in so many ways. And it's something that can be experienced firsthand when we practice Bhakti Yoga. And when we integrate this kind of practice into our lives, then the benefits are monumental and far-reaching. And it's not just limited to our realization of ourselves as spiritual beings. However, our material lives also benefit because our perspective broadens and we become more understanding of our place in the world and what to expect and what not to expect. So we adjust our expectations. Now, today I'm going to leave you with the sacred Maha Mantra meditation, which is integral to the practice of Bhakti Yoga. So you may like to pay attention and remember it as part of a way that you can actually incorporate it into your daily life. The Bhakti Yoga practitioner actually chants this mantra every day on japa beads, personal japa beads, and also will chant this congregationally in groups of like-minded devotees or fellow practitioners of Bhakti Yoga. So I encourage you to avail yourself of more information on this incredible sacred Maha Mantra. And you can actually visit my website for more information. So newheart-newworld.com. So I will chant the mantra now. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this Maha Mantra is a very good starting point and is also the end point for all of our endeavors to achieve eternal and lasting happiness. And of course, I will be creating many more videos to share more of the secrets of Bhakti Yoga, so please stay tuned. And just on a parting note, it's just important to remember that in time, once we recognize who we are as spiritual beings and adopt a spiritual lifestyle into our consciousness and our way of going about the world, then we begin to understand who we really are. And that is a cause for celebration. So until the next video, I wish you all well. Bye for now.